So this is making hard apple cider. On sale at Walmart. Gallon. I can't remember, it was months ago. I think it was maybe $2.50 or something for it. So it's kind of like a gallon of hard cider for $2.50. Can't go wrong. Finally used up the last of my big jugs. I'm going to clean that one out. There's one of them over there. Did up this one. I had the first of it last night. I had to pour it from there into here. Drink out of this one. Kind of minimize my backwash. So you got your sugars and this. Let's see what we got. A whole lot of sugars. Now, I guess the important thing is pasteurized apple cider and ascorbic acid. So there's no high fructose corn syrup. So this is what I do. Yeasts. And like champagne yeast is one of the better yeasts to use. Gives you a lot of bubbles and no real aftertaste. But then you gotta like order it or something, you know, unless you happen to live by a brewery store. So I just use bread yeast, you know. I like these. You know, they stay in these nice little airtight pouches, foil pouches, so they can sit around for a couple years or something. Yeah, I did that one, you know, and I guess this right here would be a primary ferment, you know. Oh yeah, I want to make sure there's no high fructose corn syrup. I'm just gonna drink out of this, drink it down a little bit. I was gonna pour it into that, but that's gonna be hard. Very nice. The yeast don't like high fructose corn syrup. Oh, this one goes here. The yeast like sugar. Yeah, so there's two kinds of things that'll turn sugar into alcohol. Yeast and bacteria. Well, that I know of. I'll just pour a little bit in there. Maybe like a quarter of a packet or something. Put in there. So I guess if you're doing official stuff, you might want to shake it up, you know, a lot to oxygenate it. You know, when the yeast reproduce, they use oxygen, you know. I think that's what they do. So they use oxygen either in the reproductions or in the alcohol makings. Oh yeah. Then you gotta, yeah, I would call this like a primary ferment. This one's been sitting week and a half maybe, and it's got some, you know, this stuff has sediments in it, you know, that just shook up. Then it also grew some more little yeasts. And you could do like a secondary ferment where you pour this into a bottle. It's no longer making bubbles, you know. It's oh, maybe it's got a few little bubbles. But it's pretty much done fermenting. It's eating up all the sugars that it wants. There's a lot of fermenting in there because there's a lot of sugars, you know. So cracking the cap, you know, loosening the cap so it can let off that steam or the carbonations. It doesn't get that much of a built-in carbonation because there's not that much pressure in there. but it's doing so much. If you have it tightened, your wrists get popping, you know, like a little bulge, you know, and maybe eventually the cap will just shoot off, you know. So it could do a secondary. So kind of it does most of its thing there, pouring it into whatever I'm drinking out of. Pour it into here, and it's done fermenting. But I could put in a little bit of fresh apple juice, which has a little bit of sugar, you know, put in some fresh apple juice in here, and then tighten this down hard, you know, the cap down hard. And so it'll have a little sugar in there, and it'll do a little fermenting, you know, making a little carbonation. It won't be much, you know, so you won't have a big buildup of yeast, you know. All the carbonation it does make will just build up pressure and kind of incorporate itself into the juice itself, you know. So that's kind of what people do for like their beer, you know. They'll do a primary and then a secondary, you know. So most of the yeast and the sediment stay in their primary, and then in their secondary they do inside the actual bottle itself, you know. And so the bottle will have some carbonations. So, you know, this is like a nice taste. You know, just a little bit of yeast in this. It's kind of like a tart almost. You can kind of taste the apple tartness in there. It's pretty weak, maybe 4% or something. And you can dump a bunch of sugar in this, you know, as much sugar as you want. And the more sugar you put in it, the stronger it gets. And the nastier it tastes, because unless you like hard alcohol flavor, you know, the taste of hard alcohol, I don't. So it gets stronger but nastier. Thing to watch out for is your headroom. You know, this is just kind of foam from me shaking it, but it will foam up a little bit. So it's been 24 hours. This is the next day. After maybe like 2 or 3 hours, it started bubbling. That's the carbon dioxides right there. You kind of see the head. Yeah, that's the level it was at, and it's the same amount, but it's just pressurized. Got a bow. Or at least some of that pressure. As the yeast start percolating, so tomorrow it'll be bubbling, you know, and it'll keep bubbling, you know, for the next week or so. But initially it'll be a lot of bubbles, as it's like, oh, this sugar, this is like, oh, OMG, you know, the yeast are eating it, making all kinds of bubbles. So the more sugar that it has, the more bubbles it'll get, you know. And doing just straight apple cider, it's not gonna make that many bubbles, you know. But what I've done before is just always adding sugar to it to make it stronger. But it's kind of like, yeah, I might as well just stop doing that, you know. But if I was adding sugar to it, that, you know, I would need a lot more headspace. You know, I've had them bubble over, you know, like those have bubbled over, you know. That's like a sticky film on top. That's pretty cool. I'm not, I don't do hygienes and stuff, you know. I just, like, I did maybe four batches in that thing, and it never got contaminated because it was just so much, the yeast are so strong, you know. They kind of overpower the other stuff. So I would just pour, you know, a gallon of this in there. I would pour in like 4 pounds of sugar in there. Or no, I was doing 4 pounds of sugar in my orange juice. I was doing 2 pounds of brown sugar in these apple cider ones. 2 pounds of brown sugar. And then I would use store-bought water. I wouldn't use my rainwater because my rainwater's got algae in it, you know, and who knows what else. I didn't want to contaminate it, you know. I didn't want to give the stuff too much to fight. Make it an easy fight for them. And it's got a nice little layer of yeast down in there. Could reuse that yeast for whatever, you know. making some breads or making some beers, some brewings or some breadings. And so you got yeast on everything, I guess. Back in Washington, I did an assortment of berries. Maybe like 5 different berries, going around picking them, you know, and it, you know, each berry is like its own little microbiome, you know, so seeing which berries had the best yeast, you know. I can't remember, I think it was a thimbleberry had the best yeast, the most carbonation, you know, closest to like a champagne yeast. You know, apples would have their own yeast on them, grapes have their own yeast on them. Granted, you know, it's a lot of it's not a particular yeast, you know, there's yeast everywhere, you know, so it's kind of a mix of yeasts on these things. But, you know, I'm guessing I had various results from the various berries, so it's kind of, it seems to me, you know, like just one berry will have a dominant yeast, you know, kind of yeast on it, you know. Yeah, so, you know, I'm just gonna dump that out on the compost pile. Kind of little dead yeast and live yeast, you know, adds to the nutrition in the soil, you know. Something in the soil will eat it, you know, some soil bacterias. Yeah, so bacterias will eat the alcohol and turn it into vinegar, you know, so it's kind of a good way of doing it this way rather than that way. Is it's a fresh start each time, you know. So if this one, you know, I did that for 4 or 5 changes, you know, over the winter, and it never got contaminated. But that was probably because it was winter. Now that it froze in here every night, you know, every night it would be below freezing in here. And my water jug would freeze up overnight, you know. Now that it's summer, you know, that just brews way too fast, you know, and it goes flat like wine, you know. And this isn't particularly carbonated. You know, I tighten this up, you know, and the carbonation will stay in there. Well, now it's, you know, done brewing, you know. It's got mild carbonation in there. But yeah, I'll finish it before it goes, the carbonation goes, but, you know, it's already gone out of that. You know, if I wanted to make this more carbonated, I could just tighten this cap down pretty tight, you know. I'll give it a little back, you know, hand tight, and then back it off a little. Yeah, that's how I do my brewings. It's the goodness. You know, as long, you know, there's the different flavor, you know, different juices. You know, grape juice would make more like a wine. You don't want to do prune juice. I've done prune juice before, and it gives you the squirts, you know. It doesn't lose that kind of laxative effect. Orange juice and apple juice were my favorite, you know. I never did fancy juices like cherry juice and stuff. Oh, I did make some out of cherry before. You know, picked a bunch of cherries and mushed them up, you know, and that was it wasn't really cherry juice, you know. I did blackberry before. Maybe blackberry and grape I mixed together, you know. And once I got a lot of fruits and berries growing, I'll be doing that, you know, but like buying blackberry juice from the store is expensive, you know, but this is like, what, 25 cents, and you know, this was on sale for $2.50. But I got some actual apple juice down there. I think it was $1.50 for some actual apple juice. So it's like $1.50 for some hard cider. You know, you really can't beat that. I think the difference, I don't know the difference, but I think it is that this isn't as filtered as apple juice. You know, they filter it and clarify it, apple juice, whereas this is more just pressed. So it's got some sediments in there. You know, it gives it that color. And it's oxidized, you know. It would be, you know, if you cut an apple, it'll turn brown, you know, unless you give it some lemon juice to keep it from oxidizing. And I've done lemon juice, lime juice in my apple juices. A little bit is good, a lot not so good, you know. I'm just keeping this simple, bam, bam, and in a week it'll be like 4%. throw in some sugar, and you know, my orange juice was probably about 20% alcohol. My orange juice was strong, you know, 4 cans of frozen orange juice, that's a 4-pound bag of sugar, 4 pounds of sugar, you know, and a gallon and a half or so gallon of water. You know, that was some strong stuff. Nasty, but strong. This has got a nice flavor to it, just keeping it simple. Yeah, that's my brewing.